I was in the middle of reviewing quarterly projections when the text from reception came. Investors are here early. Also, the new VP just arrived. Perfect timing. I'd been working since 5 a.m. preparing for this board meeting, the one where I'd unveil our company's expansion strategy. 3 years of building from nothing to a $4-5 million valuation, and today was pivotal. I smoothed my charcoal blazer, grabbed my presentation notes, and headed down to greet them. The lobby gleamed under soft lighting, our company logo backlit on brushed steel. I spotted our investors immediately, Diane from Vertex Capital and Martin from Highland Group, both in animated conversation with someone whose back was turned to me. The new VP, clearly. The board had insisted I hire seasoned leadership to scale the company I'd founded. After weeks of interviews, we'd landed on this guy, former strategy director at a major consulting firm. Impressive references, the whole package. I was halfway across the lobby when he turned around. Tall, immaculately dressed in a tailored suit, projecting that particular brand of corporate confidence that comes from never having your belonging questioned. He gave me a quick once-over, barely registering my presence. Then, he did it. Without breaking his conversation with Martin, he shrugged off his wool cashmere coat and tossed it at me. Actually, tossed it. "Get me a black coffee and hang up my coat, sweetheart," he said, not bothering to look at me. "The board meeting is for executives only." The coat landed in my arms before I could react. I stood frozen, acutely aware of Diane's widened eyes, the receptionist's mortified expression. "And make it quick," he added, finally glancing at me. "We're starting soon." In that moment, I had choices. Create a scene? Correct him immediately? I weighed them all in the space of a breath. "Of course," I replied quietly, turning away with his coat. I walked 10 paces before he called after me. "Oh, and if you see Janina, tell her I'm here." Janina, me. He was looking for me while dismissing me to my face. I nodded and continued walking, my mind already calculating moves like a chess player. Because that's what you learn as a woman founder. When to speak, when to wait, when to let someone reveal themselves fully before you decide what to do about them. I knew one thing with absolute certainty. This moment would matter, for both of us. Before I continue, thank you for being here. I rarely share these stories outside my close circle, but sometimes the experiences we face deserve to be voiced. Drop a comment letting me know if you've ever been invisibilized in your own space. I read them all, and it helps to know I'm not alone in this. My name is Janina, and until 6 months ago, I ran every aspect of Edge Analytics, the enterprise intelligence platform I coded in my apartment 4 years earlier. The idea came while working at a major tech company, where I noticed how poorly executives understood their own operations. My platform changed that, giving real-time insights into productivity bottlenecks, resource allocation, and team dynamics. We grew fast, too fast. According to the board, "You need experienced leadership," they insisted. During our last funding round, someone who scaled before. I resisted initially. This was my company, my vision. But they made funding contingent on bringing in adult supervision. That phrase still makes my teeth clench. After interviewing 12 candidates, I reluctantly settled on Garrett, polished, articulate, with the pedigree my investors respected. Stanford MBA, Boston Consulting Group, 2 successful exits. On paper, perfect. His references checked out, though one former colleague made a comment that should have been a warning. He always delivers results, but watch how he treats people below his pay grade. I dismissed it. We all have blind spots in reference checks, right? His first 2 days had been a blur of introductions and onboarding. This board meeting would be his first real appearance, and he'd just made quite the impression. After leaving the lobby, I didn't head to the coffee station. I went to my office, hung his coat in my closet, and texted my assistant, Maya. "Meeting in 5 minutes. Bring the keynote presentation to the boardroom." Then I texted Diane. "Running a few minutes late. Please have everyone take their seats." I gave myself exactly 3 minutes to process my anger. Not to dissolve it, to distill it into something precise and useful. Anger like this can cloud judgment or sharpen it. I chose the latter. When I entered the boardroom, conversation immediately hushed. 8 people sat around the mahogany table, including Garrett, who was mid-anecdote about some consulting triumph. "Sorry I'm late," I said, taking my place at the head of the table. Garrett's expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror as Maya handed me the presentation remote. Before we begin, I continued smoothly. I believe introductions are in order. I'm Janina Chen, founder and CEO, and you must be Garrett Phillips, our new VP of Operations. The look on his face, that moment of realization, was almost worth the humiliation in the lobby. I believe you were looking for me earlier? I added, holding his gaze until he looked away. To his credit, he recovered quickly. A misunderstanding, he said with a forced laugh. My apologies. The meeting proceeded. I delivered my presentation on our expansion strategy, fielded questions, secured the approvals we needed, professional, focused, as though nothing had happened. But everyone in that room knew the dynamic had been established in those first 30 seconds. After the meeting, Garrett approached me, hand extended. Janina, I want to sincerely apologize for earlier. I made an incorrect assumption. I shook his hand firmly. Yes, you did. Your coat is in my office. I feel terrible. It won't happen again. I'm sure it won't, I replied. We have our one-on-one tomorrow morning. We can discuss expectations then. I could have fired him on the spot. Maybe I should have, but something told me to wait, to watch and understand exactly what kind of problem I was dealing with. That night, I called my oldest friend, Zoe, who runs her own architectural firm. You're not going to believe what happened today, I began, recounting the incident. Please tell me you fired him, Zoe said when I finished. Not yet. Janina, this is textbook. He'll undermine you at every turn. Men like that don't change overnight. I know, I said, staring out my apartment window at the city lights. But I want to understand the pattern first. Is this who he fundamentally is? Or was it a terrible first impression? You're giving him too much benefit of the doubt. Maybe, I admitted. Or maybe I'm giving myself time to decide the most effective response. The truth was more complicated. I'd fought too hard to build this company, to make impulsive decisions, even justified ones. Firing our brand new VP without documenting a pattern would create board problems I didn't need. But more than that, I wanted to understand exactly what I was dealing with. The following morning, I arrived at the office early, reviewing Garrett's personnel file before our meeting. His resume was flawless, his interview notes impressive. On paper, he was exactly what we needed. He arrived 5 minutes early for our 9 a.m. meeting, knocking on my open door with uncharacteristic tentativeness. Come in, I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Coffee? No, thank you, he replied, clearly uncomfortable with the role reversal. I studied him for a moment. In another context, he epitomized executive presence, confident posture, articulate speech, that particular quality of assumed belonging that came from a lifetime of institutional validation. Yesterday was unfortunate, I began. But it happens. What matters now is how we move forward. Relief flooded his features. I completely agree. It was an honest mistake that won't happen again. Tell me, I said, leaning forward slightly. What made you assume I was an assistant? The question caught him off guard. He began, then paused. I was expecting the CEO to be in the boardroom already. The meeting wasn't scheduled to start for another 20 minutes. Right. I suppose I just made an assumption. It was wrong, and I apologize. I nodded slowly. Garrett, I selected you for this position because your experience complements what we've built. The board wanted seasoned leadership, and your track record is impressive. But for this to work, we need absolute clarity about roles and expectations. Of course, he said quickly. I'm here to support your vision and help scale operations. Good, because while I value your expertise, this is still my company. I built it from nothing. Every line of core code, every initial client relationship, every aspect of our culture that came from me and the team I assembled. His expression remained carefully neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. Doubt? Reassessment? I couldn't quite place it. I understand completely, he said. For the next hour, we discussed his onboarding plan, his responsibilities, and immediate priorities. He was engaged, offering thoughtful insights about operational inefficiencies he'd already noticed. Had yesterday been simply an unfortunate first impression? Over the next 2 weeks, the answer became increasingly clear. It wasn't. In his first executive team meeting, he interrupted our chief marketing officer, Layla, 3 separate times, talking over her marketing strategy presentation, Yet, when Ryan from product management spoke, Garrett listened attentively. During client calls, he routinely directed technical questions to male team members, even when I was the most qualified person to answer. In one particularly telling moment, he stepped in front of me to shake hands with a potential investor, effectively positioning himself as the primary decision maker. Each incident was subtle enough to seem accidental in isolation, but the pattern was unmistakable. I started keeping notes, time-stamped and detailed. Then came the strategy session, where everything crystallized. We were discussing our enterprise sales approach when Garrett leaned back in his chair, interrupting our sales director mid-sentence. "What we really need," he announced, "is to pivot toward larger clients. The current approach is too fragmented." This directly contradicted the strategy I'd outlined the previous week. "Interesting," I said evenly. "What data are you basing that on?" He smiled with practiced ease. "My experience at BCG. We saw this pattern repeatedly with companies at our stage. He'd almost said your stage, as if he wasn't part of the company but rather observing it from above. "I'd like to see the analysis," I said. "Can you have it on my desk by tomorrow?" His confidence faltered slightly. Of course, that analysis never materialized. Instead, the next day, he forwarded an article about enterprise sales strategies, with key passages highlighted, someone else's thinking presented as support for his position. That evening, I called Maya into my office. "I need you to do something discreetly," I said, closing the door. "Start tracking every meeting Garrett schedules, especially with board members or investors." Maya's eyebrows rose. "You think he's going around you?" "I think he's establishing parallel lines of communication." "Just watch and document." Maya had been with me since the beginning. My first hire, initially as an assistant, now our chief of staff. She missed nothing. "On it," she said. "And Janina?" The engineering team mentioned he's been asking a lot of questions about the architecture and codebase, technical questions beyond the scope of his role. I nodded slowly. Interesting. When she left, I opened my laptop and reviewed Garrett's employment contract, focusing on the intellectual property and non-compete clauses. Something felt off, and I'd learned to trust that instinct. 3 days later, Maya forwarded an email that confirmed my suspicions. Garrett had scheduled a casual lunch with Martin from Highland Group, without mentioning it to me. The calendar invitation included a pre-discussion of strategic options for edge analytics. Strategic options. For my company, without me. That night, I barely slept, moving from anger to strategic calculation and back again. By morning, I had the outline of a plan. Not to fire him. That would be too simple, too expected. No, I needed something that would both protect my company and teach a lasting lesson. I texted my friend Zoe, "Need to discuss something important. Dinner tonight?" We met at a small Ethiopian restaurant where the ambient noise would ensure privacy. "He's setting up meetings with our investors without telling me," I explained, breaking pieces off the injera bread between us, suggesting strategic options for the company. Zoe's eyes narrowed. "Like what? Selling? Replacing you?" "I don't know yet, but I do know he's been unusually interested in our proprietary algorithms. He's asking engineers about implementation details that have nothing to do with operations." "That sounds like he's gathering intelligence," I finished, "possibly for competitors, or preparing for some kind of power move." Zoe set down her glass. "You need to fire him, immediately. If I fire him without documented cause, the board will question my leadership. He's been careful to maintain plausible deniability with everything. Plus, firing him doesn't solve the underlying problem, which is that men like Garrett keep failing upward because no one ever makes them face consequences." I outlined my plan to her. It wasn't simple termination. It was education. That's... Zoe paused, searching for the right word. Elegant and slightly terrifying. "Is it too much?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "No, it's exactly enough." The next morning, I scheduled a one-on-one with Garrett for later that week. Then I began my preparations. First, I met with our legal counsel, Tessa, explaining my concerns without revealing my intentions. "I need to understand our options if we discover a breach of confidentiality or conflict of interest," I said. "Depends on the severity and evidence," Tessa replied. "But your employment contracts are solid, especially for executives. What about recording conversations in our offices? What's the legal standing there?" She gave me a measured look. California is a two-party consent state for recordings. However, your employment agreements include consent to recording in company spaces for security and compliance purposes. I nodded. Good. Next, I spoke privately with our head of engineering, Dev, who'd been with me almost from the beginning. I need you to do something unconventional, I said, explaining my concerns about Garrett's questions regarding our system architecture. Dev leaned back, his expression darkening. Now that you mention it, his questions have been targeted, very specific to our proprietary methods. I want to create a sandbox environment, I explained. A version of our system that looks real, but contains subtly modified code. If that code ever appears elsewhere, we'd have proof, Dev finished. I can set it up so only specific credentials C would access that version. Perfect. With those elements in place, I met with each executive team member individually, carefully gauging their experiences. With Garrett, a pattern emerged. He cultivated allies among the men while subtly undermining the women. He'd taken credit for Layla's marketing strategy in an investor email. He'd dismissed our CFO Rachel's financial projections as overly cautious in a board update. By the time our scheduled one-on-one arrived, I was prepared. Garrett entered my office with his usual confidence, settling into the chair across from me. Janina, he greeted me. I've been looking forward to this. I have some exciting ideas about our enterprise strategy. Before we get to that, I said, sliding a folder across the desk, I'd like to discuss these. He opened the folder to find printouts of emails he'd sent to Martin and two other board members. Emails discussing leadership structure concerns and execution risks under current management. His expression shifted from confusion to wariness. These were confidential communications with my board members about my company's leadership, specifically questioning it. I kept my voice calm. Did you think they wouldn't share these with me? He recovered quickly. Janina, you're misinterpreting this. I was simply providing my professional assessment, which is what you hired me for. No, Garrett, I hired you to strengthen operations, not to undermine my position with investors. He leaned forward, voice dropping into what I recognized as his persuasion register. Look, this industry moves fast. The board brought me in because they know companies like this need experienced leadership to scale. I'm trying to help position you, for success. By suggesting I might not be the right person to lead the company I founded? That's not, he stopped, recalibrating. I think we're having a communication breakdown here. My intention was to highlight areas where my experience could complement yours. I studied him for a long moment. You know what's interesting? You've been here nearly a month, and you've never once asked about my background or expertise. Did you bother researching me before accepting this position? He shifted uncomfortably. Of course, your entrepreneurial story is impressive. My entrepreneurial story, I repeated. Not my technical background, my patents, my 5 years leading development teams at Oracle before founding Edge. His silence was answer enough. Here's what's going to happen, I continued. We're going to try an experiment. You clearly believe there are leadership gaps I'm not addressing. So prove it. For the next month, I want weekly strategy documents from you. Specific, detailed operational improvements with measurable outcomes. That's reasonable, he said, visibly relieved this wasn't going worse. I can certainly provide that. And one more thing. I'm restructuring how you'll integrate with the team. Starting Monday, you'll spend one full day with each department: engineering, product, marketing, sales, customer success, not leading or directing, observing, learning how we actually operate before proposing changes. His smile tightened. I've already met with those teams. Meeting isn't understanding. You'll start with customer success, handling support tickets, joining troubleshooting calls. Then, a day with sales, making actual calls. Then engineering. Janina, with all due respect, that's not an effective use of my experience. I was hired for executive leadership, not frontline work. How can you lead what you don't understand? I ask simply. This isn't punishment, Garrett. It's opportunity. Learn how this company actually functions from the ground up. Then your strategic recommendations will have real value. I could see him calculating, weighing his options, refuse and potentially lose his position, or comply and endure what he clearly considered beneath him. Fine, he finally said. If that's what you need to establish trust, I'll do it. Excellent. Maya will send you the schedule. We'll reconvene in a month to assess progress. After he left, I remained at my desk, turning our conversation over in my mind. His reluctance told me everything. He didn't want to understand the company. He wanted to control it. The next morning, I arrived early to find Layla waiting outside my office. "We need to talk," she said, following me inside. "Garrett called me last night, asking about our conversation." I frowned. "What conversation?" "Exactly. We never had one. He implied you'd raised concerns about my marketing strategy and wanted my side of the story. He was fishing for division." My suspicions solidified into certainty. "Thank you for telling me. Janina, what's really going on with him?" I considered how much to share. Layla had been with me for 2 years. Loyal, brilliant, essential to our growth. "I think," I said carefully, "Garrett was hired with certain expectations about his role here. Expectations that may not align with reality." "You mean he thought he'd be running things?" she translated. "Something like that." She leaned forward. "The team is behind you. 100%. Whatever you need." Her words settled something in me. I wasn't fighting this battle alone. "Actually," I said, "there is something you can help with." The following Monday, Garrett reported to the customer success department as directed, his displeasure barely concealed beneath professional courtesy. Priya, our head of customer experience, later told me he spent most of the day on his phone, paying minimal attention to the support processes she was explaining. He kept saying things like, "I'm just trying to get the big picture," whenever I asked him to actually try handling a ticket, she reported. On Tuesday, he shadowed the sales team, but refused to make actual calls, instead observing and taking occasional notes. By Wednesday, with engineering, his true interests became clear. Despite his disinterest in other departments, he peppered Dev with questions about our core algorithms and data processing methods. "He's definitely gathering intelligence," Dev confirmed that evening. "Very specific questions about implementation details and our proprietary methods." "Is he accessing the sandbox environment?" "Yes, multiple times. He's been downloading documentation too." I nodded. "Keep tracking it." Meanwhile, I'd begun phase 2 of my plan. I scheduled a special executive committee meeting for Friday afternoon. "Quarterly strategic review," the invitation read. "All department heads required. Please prepare 5-minute updates on key initiatives." When Friday arrived, the conference room filled with our leadership team. Garrett positioned himself prominently near the head of the table, next to where I would sit. I noticed he'd dressed particularly well. Custom suit, expensive watch prominently displayed, ready to impress. I entered precisely on time, Maya behind me with her tablet. "Thank you all for being here," I began. "Before we start department updates, I have an important announcement." The room quieted. The board has approved a new executive position, Chief Innovation Officer. This role will spearhead our next-generation products and represent edge analytics at major industry events. Garrett sat up straighter, interest evident. "This is a critical leadership role, reporting directly to me, with significant visibility to the board and our key partners." I paused, letting the information sink in. Garrett was practically vibrating with restrained eagerness. "I'll be conducting interviews starting next month. The ideal candidate will have deep understanding of our technology, our culture, and most importantly, our people." I met Garrett's eyes directly. "I expect several internal candidates will be considered." The message was clear. This was the carrot, a prestigious position with exactly the kind of visibility and influence he craved. "Now," I continued, "let's begin our updates. Layla, would you start us off with marketing?" As the meeting progressed, I watched Garrett carefully. He was fully engaged now, asking thoughtful questions, offering genuinely useful insights. Amazing how the prospect of advancement could transform his behavior. After the meeting, he approached me. "Janina, that new position sounds fascinating. I'd like to discuss it further when you have time." "Of course," I replied. "In fact, why don't we talk about it during our one-on-one next week? I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on the role." His smile was genuine for once. "I appreciate that. I have some ideas already taking shape." As he walked away, Maya gave me a knowing look. "Hook set?" she murmured. "Deep," I confirmed quietly. Now we reel him in. Our one-on-one the following week was a stark contrast to previous meetings. Garrett arrived with a sleek presentation deck titled Innovation Roadmap, complete with market analysis and competitive differentiation strategies. I took the liberty of drafting some initial thoughts, he said, opening his laptop. For the next 30 minutes, he outlined his vision for the Chief Innovation Officer role. Some ideas were genuinely insightful. He hadn't risen to his position without talent. Others revealed his fundamental misunderstanding of our product's core strengths. "This is thorough," I said when he finished. "You've clearly put considerable thought into it." His smile was warm, confident. "I believe I'm uniquely positioned for this role, Janina. My background in strategy consulting gives me the market perspective, while the past month here has given me insight into Edge's operations." "About that," I said, "how have you found the departmental rotations?" His enthusiasm dimmed slightly. "Educational, certainly. Though I think my time could be more strategically applied going forward. Actually, I wanted to discuss an extension of that process." I slid a folder across the desk. "This is a draft of an executive development program I'm implementing. 6 weeks of immersion across all company functions." He opened the folder, skimming the contents. 6 weeks? That seems excessive for someone at my level. "It's comprehensive," I corrected, "and a prerequisite for the CIO position. I need whoever takes that role to understand our business from the ground up, not just strategy, but implementation." The calculation played across his features. 6 weeks of what he considered beneath him versus the prestige of the new title. "I understand," he finally said. "When would this start?" "Next Monday. You'd begin with a full week supporting our office management team, administrative functions, facility operations, front desk duties, the foundation of how we actually operate day to day." I watched the muscle in his jaw tighten. "Front desk duties? Every part of this company matters, Garrett. That's our culture. I worked the front desk myself during our first year when we couldn't afford additional staff." He nodded stiffly. "Of course, whatever it takes." As he left my office, I knew he was hooked. The prospect of the prestigious title outweighed his disdain for the process. What he didn't realize was that the process itself was the test, one I already knew he would fail. The following Monday, Garrett reported dutifully to Jen, our office manager. She later told me he spent the first day making painfully obvious efforts to appear engaged while constantly checking his watch and taking important calls that mysteriously required privacy. "He keeps asking when he'll be back to real work," she reported, as if what we do isn't real work. By Wednesday, his facade was cracking. Maya forwarded me an email he'd sent to Martin from our board, requesting a confidential discussion about operational priorities. I noticed he'd also scheduled meetings with 2 other executives during hours he was supposed to be with the administrative team. Thursday morning, I received a text from Jen. "He's not here," said he had a strategic planning emergency and left. I wasn't surprised. I found him in the glass-walled conference room, laptop open, on a video call with someone I didn't recognize. I waited until he finished, then knocked lightly on the open door. "Garrett, I was expecting you to be with Jen today." He closed his laptop. "Janina, I need to be pragmatic about time management. While I appreciate the intent behind this rotation program, there are pressing strategic matters that require my attention." "More pressing than the commitment you made?" I asked quietly. "This is about prioritization. I can learn what I need about administrative functions in a day, not a week." "The point isn't just learning processes," I said. "It's understanding the people who make this company function at every level, respecting their contributions." He sighed, adopting the tone one might use with a naive idealist. "Janina, I admire your people-first philosophy, but business at this scale requires tough choices about where senior leadership focuses their attention." "You're right about tough choices," I replied, "which is why I'm making one now. This development program isn't optional for the CIO role. It reflects the values of our organization." "Are you saying if I don't spend a week at the front desk, I won't be considered for the position?" "I'm saying how you engage with this process tells me everything about whether you're aligned with our company's culture and values." His expression hardened. "I've led teams at organizations 3 times this size. I've advised Fortune 100 CEOs. This isn't an effective use of my expertise." "That's your decision to make," I said simply, "but it will influence mine." For a moment, raw calculation showed on his face, weighing his pride against his ambition. Ambition won. "Fine, he said. I'll return to the rotation program, but I'd like to register my professional assessment that this isn't optimal resource allocation. Noted, I replied. When he left, I texted Maya. Is the board meeting prep complete for tomorrow? She responded immediately. Everything ready. Dev has the technical presentation prepared too. The next day, our monthly board meeting began at 9 a.m. sharp. I had privately briefed several trusted board members about my concerns regarding Garrett, careful to focus on documented behaviors rather than suspicions. When we reached the technology update section of the agenda, I nodded to Dev, who connected his laptop to the presentation screen. Before we discuss our Q3 development roadmap, I began. I want to address a security concern that's recently come to our attention. The room quieted. Garrett shifted in his seat. Dev, could you explain what your team discovered? Dev cleared his throat. We recently identified unusual access patterns to our proprietary algorithm documentation. Someone has been downloading substantial portions of our core IP, particularly around our predictive analytics engine. I watched Garrett's face carefully. His expression remained neutral, but his fingers tensed around his pen. Martin from the board leaned forward. Are you saying we've had a security breach? Not external, Dev clarified. These downloads occurred using authorized credentials, but in patterns inconsistent with job responsibilities. Whose credentials? Asked Diana, another board member. Dev glanced at me. I nodded slightly. Executive-level credentials assigned to Garrett Phillips. The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Garrett, who maintained remarkable composure. I've been researching our technology to better understand our competitive positioning, he said smoothly. As discussed with Janina, I've been developing strategic recommendations for our innovation roadmap. This required technical understanding of our current capabilities. Over 20 gigabytes of technical documentation? Dev asked, including implementation details for algorithms not related to your operational responsibilities? Garrett's smile tightened. I'm thorough, and as I understood it, the CIO role would oversee technical innovation. I was preparing accordingly. I leaned forward. Garrett, Dev hasn't mentioned yet that some of the documentation you accessed was modified, specifically for your user credentials. His composure faltered slightly. Modified how? Fingerprinted, Dev said. Subtle alterations that wouldn't affect functionality, but would be identifiable if the code appeared elsewhere. It's a standard security practice for high-value IP. The implication hung in the air. Garrett's face flushed. Are you suggesting I was stealing company information? That's absurd. I was doing my job, the job Janina encouraged me to prepare for. I turned to the board. I believe Garrett has shown genuine interest in our technology. My concern is the pattern of behavior, accessing sensitive information beyond his scope, meeting privately with board members to discuss leadership concerns, and most recently, disregarding the development program he agreed to participate in. Martin frowned. What development program? I briefly explained the rotation system and Garrett's resistance to it. As I spoke, I could see the narrative taking shape in the board members' minds. Not of a villain twirling his mustache, but of an executive who believed himself above the company's culture and processes. Additionally, I continued, we've documented several instances where Garrett has undermined female executives while appropriating their work. I distributed a folder containing emails, meeting notes, and testimony from team members. Diana reviewed the materials, her expression darkening. This is concerning, to say the least. Garrett's professional mask was slipping. This is a coordinated attempt to discredit me because I've identified operational inefficiencies that require attention. Janina feels threatened by executive expertise. That's why she has the CIO role dangling like a carrot while making me perform demeaning tasks. Demeaning? I repeated. You mean working alongside the people who make this company function? Understanding their challenges and contributions? Be realistic, he snapped, frustration breaking through. A VP shouldn't be answering phones or making coffee. It's not efficient leadership. The room went still. In his defensive anger, he'd revealed exactly what I needed the board to see. His fundamental belief that certain work was beneath him, that certain people were beneath him. Martin cleared his throat. Garrett, would you give us a few minutes with Janina, please? Garrett stood, straightening his jacket. Of course, but I hope you'll consider the larger picture here. Edge analytics needs experienced leadership to scale effectively. That was the whole reason for bringing me on. After he left, Diana turned to me. How long has this been going on? Since his first day, I said. I've been documenting it carefully before bringing it to your attention. I wanted to be certain this wasn't just an adjustment period. And the CIO position? Martin asked. Is that real? Not yet, I admitted. I created it as a controlled environment to observe his behavior. If he was genuinely interested in helping the company succeed, he would have embraced learning how we operate at every level. Instead, he revealed that he considers much of our work, and by extension, our people, beneath his attention. The board discussed the situation for 20 minutes, reviewing the documentation I'd provided. Their conclusion was unanimous. We'll support whatever action you recommend, Martin finally said. This isn't the leadership addition we had hoped for. When Garrett returned, Martin delivered the board's decision. His employment was terminated, effective immediately. This is a mistake, Garrett said, looking at each board member. You brought me in because you recognized the need for experienced leadership. Are you really going to let Janina's insecurity derail that? Diana's voice was cool. We brought you in to strengthen the company's operations, not to undermine its founder or devalue its culture. Your actions have demonstrated a fundamental misalignment with what Edge Analytics stands for. As Garrett gathered his things, escorted by our head of security, I felt no satisfaction, only resolution. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting what we'd built and the people who built it with me. That evening, I stayed late, walking through the quiet office. I stopped at the front desk where Jen was finishing up her day. I heard what happened, she said. The team's already talking about it. What are they saying? I asked. She smiled. That you see everything, and that you'll always have our backs. This company works because everyone matters, I said. That's not ideology. It's how we succeed. Well, we appreciate it. And for what it's worth, he was terrible at answering phones, kept transferring calls to the wrong departments. I laughed. Somehow that doesn't surprise me. As I walked to my office, I thought about tomorrow's all-hands meeting, where I'd need to address Garrett's departure. This wasn't the end of our challenges. The board still wanted experienced leadership, and I'd need to find it. But at least now they understood the kind of leadership we actually needed. My phone buzzed with a text from Zoe. Heard the news. You okay? I typed back. Better than okay. Clear. There's a certain clarity that comes from standing your ground, not in anger or revenge, but in the simple defense of what matters. The company I'd built wasn't perfect, but its foundational values were worth protecting. The belief that everyone's contribution mattered, that respect flowed in all directions, that no one was above the essential work that kept us running. In the end, Garrett wasn't defeated by some elaborate scheme. He was undone by the simplest of tests, the willingness to see value in work he considered beneath him, to recognize the humanity in those he thought invisible, and that, perhaps, was the most revealing lesson of all. If you enjoyed this story about standing your ground against workplace discrimination, please leave a like and subscribe. I'm curious, what would you have done in Janina's situation? Would you have confronted Garrett immediately in the lobby or taken a different approach? Your comments always make these stories more meaningful.